God is good, and with each day that passes brings us a day closer to the launch of Pantheon Rise of the Fallen. This is the Nathan Napalm channel, and if you are new here, please consider subscribing. And today we're going to be talking more about the big major updates we got from Joppa Perkins in his interview with Kilsin for Pantheon Rise of the Fallen, upcoming MMORPG. We'll be talking about Houdini, the potential investors and publishers, racial activities and mastery, Infamy, VIPs testing the evaluation build, raid content, Progeny updates, and so much more. So stay tuned to the end as we uncover as much as we can from this update. And by the way, if you missed the first video about this update to Pantheon Rise of the Fallen, upcoming MMO, there'll be a link in the description down below. Make sure you go check out part 1. This is part 2 of this update we got here for May. Before we begin, I want to give a big major shout out to the members of Napalm. Thank you all so very much for your support. I could not do this without you. You are the sponsors of this channel. And if you would like to help support this channel, please click the join button down below for more information and a list of perks. And a very special thank you to the Lords of Napalm, Bounty Code, and Ray Cooper. Thank you for your highest tier membership. Alright, so since Visionary Realms is a small development team, making a giant world, I mean, these zones are fantastically huge, is quite an undertaking, especially with the scope that Pantheon Rise of the Fallen is going for. So they have implemented a tool, you probably heard of it before, but real quick I want to touch on Houdini, which they're using to make the world faster, but then of course they're going back in and handcrafting those sections, but it does speed up the process a lot. Let's hear what Joppa had to say about Houdini.
I mean, I've never seen anything quite like Houdini. They're just an unbelievably, unimaginably complex and deep program. What do you even call it?
Yeah.
Like, it's not, and so his ability to wield that and his proficiency in wielding that has been pretty amazing. And the point being, like, these procedural terrain generation solutions that exist, Houdini, there are others, they're key to getting a large game world finished quickly. And that's really what it boils down to. There's a lot of world to make. They don't take the place of, hand-touched development with an artist and, someone with an eye for aesthetic and heart for the actual lore and setting and story and point of our game. Like, it doesn't replace that, but it goes so far into getting the broad strokes of the terrain and the different assets and things that exist in these scenes on this terrain in place very quickly. And so it's paramount. It's a paramount tool. We need it, and I'm thankful that we have the solutions that we do.
So I am glad that they're using Houdini, because anything that's going to help them with development and move things faster, get us to alpha beta launch, is obviously going to be a good thing if it speeds up development time. But moving forward, I wanted to play this clip of Joppa, who's talking about potential investors and publishers. Let's have a listen.
Things are going really well, and we're in a really good spot. I'm fortunate to be present at just about every demonstration that we do with various investors and interested parties. And the ones that we have done of late, especially post Fortress d'Evair and the evaluation experience, they've been really, really, really good. So I'm happy with where we're at.
Confidence is high in the team. Everyone's moving forward and working hard.
At this point, I'm just really waiting for the announcement that they grabbed up a huge investor or a huge publisher, and that they're going to be staffing up and see all the hiring and then get everybody in there and they can just flesh out what they built, because they've got so many tools in place that if they just had the staff, man, this would move so quick. They know it. You should know it if you've been following, and it would be awesome. And I can't wait to see that day. And I really love, by the way, that they're being so picky with what investors or publishers that they make a deal with, because they don't want it to hurt the vision of the game. So there have already been interested parties that, just wasn't a deal maker because of some aspect that didn't fit the vision. Very respectable. Don't see a lot of game developers putting the vision this much in the forefront. So major kudos. Next up, Joppa runs through a lot of topics. So let's have a listen as we go through racial actives and all kinds of things. Here we go.
Racial active. So I've intentionally pulled these back, and not as in we're not going to have them. We are, but I'm just sitting on them for now. Partly because they're likely to go through multiple iterations, and partly because I'm wanting to experiment with a few things related to the racial active abilities, and I don't want to lock us into something before we've had the chance to explore some of that. As far as the general mastery question, so this is my understanding in this question is that we have the ability mastery, which we've seen and talked quite a bit about. But then we also, I've referenced a general character mastery as well, which is not ability related, but more developing kind of a broader spectrum of incremental advancements for your character to improve various aspects of them. So the question is, what categories will be included, and what options do players have in regards to how they can acquire mastery points? So again, we know mastery is critical to ability development, and have likened it to kind of a blend of the alternate advancement system and talent type system. And there's plenty of info out there on how they relate to abilities. As far as it relates to general character development, players will also be able to invest mastery into several incremental improvements for their character, everything from a bonus to faction gains, increasing stat caps, altering your base movement, swimming, climbing, speed, various non-attribute stat enhancements, and key as far as like, we don't want mastery to directly increase your strength or your stamina, but mastery that can boost, other secondary stat type aspects of your character. So things like your potency or your dodge rating and things like that. And then into things like acclamation bonuses and other various character related. And all these are, again, they're very incremental. They're not meant to be, these massive like boosts in power, but they're meant to be part of just slowly and incrementally developing your character more fully.
I'm very excited about the mastery, especially the general, because I've gotten to sample the mastery for abilities, and that's very awesome as well. But the general for the character kind of mastery is kind of like the AA of Pantheon kind of thing, alternate advancement, and it looks like they're putting a lot of care into it. Anyway, let's move forward and hear what Joppa had to say about Infamy.
Infamy is my attempt at designing a system of incentives and constraints. The intent would be to organically manage the top end player culture, specifically in helping, not necessarily preventing, but helping to slow and disrupt content monopolization at the highest levels, which is typically what we see in these games, where there is a high-end level-based, the guilds that get the biggest and the strongest are able to keep a relative hold on that content. So Infamy is a system that is designed not through some kind of artificial method to organically and naturally help by slowing and disrupting some of that monopolization, but not in a punitive way, but actually through the use of incentives. And again, it's a big system that we'll do a better breakdown on at some point.
So if you remember back, there was a time when Brad McQuaid said that they had a system in place to help with monopolization of big guilds taking over, etc., and it had a name and it has systems, but they weren't ready to announce it. I believe the Infamy system was exactly what he was referring to. Now, still we don't have a ton of information on it, but now at least it has a name and we know the name, right? Infamy. So we're going to get more into raid content and raid bosses here in a minute during this discussion. Joppa's going to talk about something that is very huge on that, but I'm very looking forward to hearing more about this Infamy system, exactly how it works and what exactly they have up their wizardly sleeves. But let's move forward about VIPs being able to test the evaluation build that me and Minus and Basgrim and Theric got to play for the community recently.
VIPs being able to test the evaluation build, yes, that is planned for sure, and we'll be opening up Fortress Sevaire for VIP testing in one of the upcoming tests.
It will be interesting to see if they tune up the difficulty even more, by the way, after me and Basgrim Minus kind of tore our way through it brutally. But now let's get to the juicy bits, because here's where Joppa's going to be talking about instanced content, because as you probably know, Pantheon Rise Fallen is an open world game with open dungeons and open raids. However, sometimes for a raid boss fight, might make sense to do some instanced fights and things like that. I've been saying that for a while now, so is Minus, so is pretty much everybody. Let's hear what Joppa had to say about this.
Instanced content, though, this is a good one. Is instanced raid content being considered? Instancing is a big discussion. We are committed to delivering an open world game. So as such, we do not have any plans or desire to do instanced dungeons. However, the only place where we have considered instancing in any kind of degree, or where it has come up internally, is when looking at raids. And I'm aware of all the downsides, but I'm also keenly aware of the good that it can serve when some, and I mean keyword some, raid level content is in a limited instance format, even if it's just temporarily before it transitions into the same open world contested format. So again, this is a large topic. It's a lot to unpack. The key here in communicating this answer is that I want to double down on our commitment to develop an open world MMO.
And I totally agree with this. So public dungeons to me are an absolute must. It's something that's missing in MMOs. It's very important. It's huge for socialization, and it makes dungeons just so much cooler. Now, I understand there's a lot of people who want more of a storyline to progress through when they're doing their dungeons. My argument to that is that's fun for the first 20 times, and then after that, it really sucks, and it's just Groundhog Day, and it really just cheapens the entire experience seeing that same storyline in that dungeon play out over and over again, as opposed to a public dungeon, especially with all the systems that Pantheon has in place with disposition and environmental dangers and all that. So that each run is not a Groundhog Day, and there's all these secret passageways, and there's people running around. You have interactions that kind of can change your entire dungeon run with other groups. Even the competitiveness of trying to find a good spot, it's just a lot of fun, and it adds so much more to the game and makes it that much more immersive, and not just immersive, but impactful and enjoyable, and something you can do over and over and over again and have a different experience every time. But when we're talking about raid fights, specifically boss fights, right? I can understand that you might want the boss to be instanced and then dump you back out into the public raid zone afterwards, etc. I also understand that there is a lot of joy from open world raid fights, but there's a lot of issues with that as well, so I think they need to do both, and I really hope that they do. Anyway, let's move forward, because Joppa had a lot to say about their philosophy and the way that they're doing tanks, because it is kind of weird that the Dire Lord is the first one that we're being able to test fully, not the Warrior, right? Like, you would think that they would start with the Warrior, and then, you know, that they'd balance from there. So let's hear what Joppa had to say about that.
Design philosophy approach, and specifically, honestly, more than anything else, it was a decision made because I wanted the non-traditional magic-oriented tanking nature of the Dire Lord front and center when developing our low to mid-level content. The traditional physical mitigation-based tanking is just that. It's traditional. And so when you look at developing NPCs and you look at developing content and encounters, you're just naturally predisposed to thinking in terms of physical damage, physical attacks, things like that. Whereas if our only tank is the tank that is meant to be more of the magically based defense, oriented around magic defense, then that automatically forces us to think in a non-traditional sense when we're looking at, the degree to which magic-based attacks and spells and, different things like that are being thought about and woven into the various NPCs that we're creating in encounters. So
yeah,
that was a lot of the reason for that decision.
That's an interesting and commendable way to approach tanking and the development of them. However, I do want to point out that please give the same love and attention to Paladin, and since that is your design philosophy, then the Paladin should be the next tank to be in the game to go along with your philosophy of tank design. And I'm not saying that selfishly because I want to be a Paladin. I'm saying that because based on your design philosophies, then you should be testing the Paladin very soon. Thank you very much. Hopefully VR. Anyway, next up is the Progeny system. So is that something that we can just expect is not going to be there for launch is kind of the question. Let's see what Joppa had to say about that. And in case you don't know, the Progeny system is where you can kind of retire your character for an additional, maybe some stat upgrades for your new one to start over. Anyway, let's see what Joppa had to say.
I wouldn't assume that it won't be in for launch. I think the way that I would want to word that is to make peace with it.
If it doesn't make the cut.
To make peace with it going either way. I'll stop myself. I could say more, but I'll leave it at that.
Look, it's such an in-depth system. It's not straightforward. It's huge. So, yeah, if we can get it in, we will. If not, don't be upset. It would most likely be coming as soon as we can.
You just have to say that when we talk about it being a huge system, and I even said recently that it's a very, the more I think about it, the more difficult and intensive it kind of reveals itself to be in my mind. And one of the reasons for that is because you're battling against the inevitability of a system like this becoming a mandatory process.
Yes.
Very, very difficult to design a system like this in a way that feels optional or that feels voluntary for the player. And when you have a system like this that is I think in so many outcomes involuntarily required for progression, you literally end up reshaping what the game is. And there's a reason why roguelikes, for example, are their own genre. They're their own thing, because they're predicated on this rhythm of like leveling and dying and leveling and dying and continuing that process over and over again, and it literally becomes what the game is. And with Pantheon, when you think about, unlike a roguelike where you can progress after 30 minutes of gameplay session, you're talking about hundreds, if not thousands, of hours. You're just talking about a value spectrum that's so cosmic in terms of your investment as a player. And then the question of, okay, do I sacrifice that for what? Like, what on earth could be on the other side of sacrificing that that would make it worthwhile? And so again, it's not a statement to say that a system like Progeny, number one, that it even has to be predicated on character sacrifice. It can be, you can over time develop different kind of special currencies or whatever, that points or whatever it may be, that you can choose to invest in your other characters based on how much time you play your main or your mains, and those other characters kind of being Progeny related and connected to your main in some way. I mean, there's lots of ways to do it, but then it quickly becomes, is it worth it? Like, does it really add? And again, I'm just trying to make it clear that I'm not dodging the question as much as it's just a very deep process of thinking through.
Yeah, I can see the Progeny system is a really cool idea, but it definitely is going to take a lot of development time to do. If it's not there for launch, I don't really care, but I do think that they need to process that and make it something, because it's a really good idea, especially there when Joppa was going into detail about perhaps it has to do with alternate characters, with your alts, instead of restarting or retiring your main, because Pantheon's not a fast game level up, etc., just like you talked about. So guys, I think that's good for today. There's still more to cover, so I will have to do a part 3, and that's great because that means we had tons of information to cover. Now, if you want to hear the entire interview between Kilsin and Joppa, I will have a link for that down below. I also have part 1 if you didn't catch that, because a lot of juicy bits there as well down below in the description. So check them out. And guys, I hope you enjoyed the video today. A lot of good juicy bits and more to come. And until next time, guys, God bless and happy gaming.